big room.
Yes.
Ooh. I'm impressed myself, sorry.
This is a big room. So it's about 425 feet long, by about 125 feet wide, depending on where you measure. And from this platform to the ceiling, it's about 45 feet. But from the water level over there to the ceiling, it's almost 70 feet. So you can just about stick a 7-story building in this room. Now, if you guys look up here at the ceiling, you'll notice that there is a pretty sizable crack where all those stalactites are growing. And that is what we like to call the lifeline of the cave. And that's where we think water first entered this cave. Now, the entire cave was basically carved out by water. So dolomite is what we like to call water soluble, which means that whenever water makes contact with it, it'll start to dissolve very slowly. So, what we think happened is that this crack formed here, then water started trickling down here and started dissolving away at this dolomite. Now, as it was dissolving away, it didn't really have anywhere to go. So eventually, this was a water-filled cavern down here. Now, as the cave was forming like that, the Merrimack River was carving down to the landscape right next to it. And it carved down enough to actually create an opening for all of that water to come flowing out of, and that's the natural entrance that you can see today. So, not too long after that, when the water was draining out of here, we started getting some deposits starting to form. And that kind of gives you a rough idea of how caves form. Any questions? No? All right. Let's keep on going this way.
Mm.
But that's quite a lot.
That is the sound of the Lost River flowing over a waterfall. Now that waterfall is actually man-made by one of the previous owners of this cave, Lester Dill. And the reason that he built the waterfall down there was because he wanted to show everyone that the Lost River really was moving. Because whenever he was bringing people in from a tour, a lot of the times they didn't really believe him when he told them that it was flowing out of the cave at about 1.5 million gallons of water per day. So, this is the largest waterfall in the entire cave. Now, can anybody tell me how high it is?
3 feet.
3 feet, okay.
2.
That was your guess for the depth of the Lost River as well.
I know.
15 meters.
What was that?
15 meters.
Okay. Anybody else? turning on and off the light. So there it is. That waterfall is actually just about 6 inches high.
Oh.
6 centimeter.
Yeah. So here we have
Oh.
the King's Canopy. This is actually the largest flowstone formation in the entire cave. Now, as we look at it, you'll notice that there's no moisture on it. So that tells us that it is dormant, unfortunately. But if it starts receiving a newer source of carbonic acid, then it will start to grow again, which would be pretty cool. Now, later on in the tour, we're actually going to be going back down there, and we'll be able to see underneath the King's Canopy. Now, whenever we do, you'll notice that there is absolutely nothing helping to support it from underneath. So, you might be wondering how it formed like that. So it looks almost like it just started flowing over open air. So, what happened here was all of the King's Canopy started forming on top of a whole bunch of clay. And as it was forming, that clay started being washed away by the Lost River. And eventually, whenever it was all washed away, the King's Canopy wound up having to support its own weight, which thankfully it was able to, so it did not break off and start falling down. So it's going to be interesting to actually be able to look under there. Now, for a bit of a size comparison here, well, okay, first off, how tall do you think this is? So say from right down there to the top here. 40 feet? Okay, that's actually very close. So it's about 40 feet, or 45 feet high from right there to up here. So from down there to the top, it's probably closer to 55 feet. So I'm about 6 feet tall, and if I were to stand there at the bottom of the King's Canopy, I'd be about as tall as that boulder.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it kind of gives you an idea of how big this thing really is. So let's go ahead and keep on going to this next room. Alright, you guys, so this room is called the Carrot Room. And it's called that because of the orange color of these deposits, and also because of these carrot-like stalactites up here. Now, since this is the Carrot Room, what does it make this hole down here? Yes. So apparently there is a rather large rabbit running through the cave, so you guys might want to watch out for that. Now, as we continue along here, and look up here to your left, you'll be able to see a red mark on those stalactites. So, back in the 1960s, when this cave was owned by Lyman Riley and Lester Dill, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers actually wanted to dam up the Merrimack River in order to make a lake. Now, at the time, Lyman Riley and Lester Dill thought that would be a pretty good idea, because they thought it would bring in a whole bunch of business for the cave. Well, they didn't really think that one through very well. So after quite some time of advertising in favor of the Merrimack Dam project, they finally decided that they should probably have a surveyor come in here to check and see what the water level would be in the cave if the dam were actually built. So they did just that and discovered that the water level would be right up in there. So a little bit more than 80% of this cave would have been underwater, and we would be in scuba gear. Now, they were not really too keen on that idea. So what happened was they actually started making bumper stickers that said, "Vote no for the Merrimack Dam project." And then whenever you'd come in for a cave tour, they would send their bumper sticker boys out to the parking lot to put the bumper stickers on your cars, whether you wanted them or not. So while their advertising method was not necessarily the best, it did work pretty well. And finally, whenever the Merrimack Dam project went up to vote in Missouri, about 74% of the voters voted no. So thankfully, it's never going to happen. But even if it had been built, it's quite possible that it wouldn't have worked out so well anyway, because there are a whole bunch of caves around the Merrimack. So it probably would have just found its way underneath that dam. So, any questions? No? Alrighty, well, let's keep on going. So, if you guys look down here, you can see some old concrete stairs. So back before we built this nice bridge, that's what we would be walking up and down. But before that, we would actually walk up these stairs right over here. And then we would walk across a cable bridge. So it went all the way over there.
I'm glad we don't do that.
Yeah. Now, one interesting thing about that cable bridge is whenever the tour guides would get out there, well, see, this was back in, say, 50s and 60s, so there wasn't really much discipline with the tour guides. So what they did was they got about halfway across that bridge, and then they turned all the lights out, and then they started to shake it. So that was probably a pretty interesting experience. Now, actually, before we had that wonderful swinging cable bridge, we had a wooden bridge, which went from right over here as well to right over there where that gray electrical box is. And it was actually dubbed the world's longest underground wooden bridge. And whenever we leave the cave today and are in the visitor center, you guys can actually see a picture of it on the wall there as we head out. So let's go ahead and keep on going here. Alrighty, you guys, so here we have two concrete boxes. Now these boxes actually contain bones. And these are the bones of some previous tours that we've had come in here. They were a little bit rowdy, so we left them behind. No, these are actually black bear bones. So back before the cave was discovered by humans in 1886, we had two black bears come in here to hibernate. And we think that while they were hibernating, the water level at the entrance that they used to get in here went up quite a ways. So they were unfortunately unable to find their way out of the cave due to that, and they wound up dying in here. But there are pros and cons to everything. And in this case, really, the only pro is that we do have some pretty cool bear bones down here now. So let's go ahead and keep on going. Alrighty, you guys. So we do have some pretty neat reflection pools in here. And these pools are actually man-made by Lester Dill. And he built them in here to not only mimic the reflection that we saw in Lost River, but also to help intensify the beauty of the cave. And in some ways, he did succeed. So now whenever we look down here at the water, you can see the ceiling reflected in it. And it does look pretty cool. Now, actually, this next room that we're going to go into here has some more reflection tools that can be very impressive. Now, if you look over here, you'll notice that there's a pretty sizable crack. And what happened here was all of these deposits started growing on top of a whole bunch of clay. And as they were growing, that clay started settling down from underneath them. So they wound up being stuck supporting their own weight, which did not work out very well for them. And they actually wound up snapping off their weakest links and settling down several inches with the clay. So if you look right up here, you can see where they've grown back together, only to settle down even further. So they are still growing back together. And if you guys want to come back here in, say, 10, 20,000 years, something like that, then they might just be grown back together. So remember to put that in your calendars. So, any questions? No? All right, well, the tour that was ahead of us is still in this next room here. We're about to come back out, but they were, well, normally we do total darkness in that room, and unfortunately we had the lights on in here, so it kind of messed up their total darkness a little bit, but it'll be okay. So, you'll notice that we don't really have any sound meters or anything like that in this pool. And that is because this concrete, well, whenever the water gets in here, it still has some particles and stuff in the concrete that are in the water, and those sound meters actually breathe through the skin when they're in the water. So they would be absorbing everything in the water, and not everything. So they don't really like to come into these pools so much due to that. Well, you know, I'm not entirely sure if they so much to begin with, but there is a little bit of water up here, guys, but you need to stay to the right. So how are you doing today? Doing good? Oh yeah, I'm doing pretty well. Just so you know, I saw a cave there a little ways back that way, and I'm not going to watch out for that. Perfect, thank you. I'm going to watch the light coming through here. Alrighty, you guys, so this room is called the Rock of Ages room. And it's called that because this formation here in the center has earned the nickname, the Rock of Ages, due to the fact that it is one of the oldest formations in the cave, as you can tell by its immense size. Now, while we're looking at it, you'll notice that it too is affected by that clay settling down. So it broke off its weakest link. And you can also see it in the wall over there to our left and in the wall over there to our right. So it really did have a pretty major impact on this section of the cave. Now we do have some more of those reflection pools in here, like I had mentioned earlier. And these guys are really cool, because if you're looking down here on the surface, it looks almost like there's a whole other room. So, at one point in time, back in the 1920s, this cave was owned by a man named Bob Bradford. Now, Mr. Bradford was coming in here and he was giving tours, and he did not actually own all of the property above the cave. So one day, one of the locals, Dr. Mook, came in for a cave tour, and he got somewhere in this area when he thought to himself, hey, you know what? I bet I'm underneath my property. So, later on that day, after he got out of the cave, he got his brother, and they went and found a spot on their property, and they started digging. And they wound up coming into the cave about a quarter of a mile back in that direction. So they came on in here, and then they brought in a surveying team to take a survey of the cave to see where the property line was, which happened to be all the way across the big room, right on this side of the twin. So a little bit later, they came in with a work team, and they actually put up a barbed wire fence there. Now, they were doing this all in the dead of night. Nobody knew about it other than them. So the next day, when the tours started coming in from Bob Bradford's side of the cave, they were a little bit surprised to find that there was a barbed wire fence across the top of the cave. So he was not very happy about that. And to make matters worse for him, Dr. Mook started giving cave tours in this half of the cave, and he called it Missouri Cavern. So due to that, Bob Bradford was suing for it. And there was a huge court battle going on for several years until finally the court ruled in favor of Dr. Mook because he owns the property above. So now there's a law in Missouri that states that you own everything underneath your property from the core of the earth, minus mineral rights. So we like to call this time period in cave history the Cave Wars, because we had two halves of the cave basically battling against each other. And we would have both tours leave approximately the same time. They would meet at the barbed wire fence where they would verbally abuse each other, and sometimes they would escalate to a clay fight. So maybe not the best time to go in for a cave tour unless you were okay with getting really muddy. So finally, World War II came along. Both halves of the cave went and shut down because nobody wanted to come and spend their money on a cave tour at that point in time. So whenever that happened, Bob Bradford was able to actually buy out this half of the cave from Dr. Mook. But unfortunately, a few years later, Bob Bradford did die. So he got to have his full Onondaga back once again. Which is, a bit about the cave's history here. And it's been a whole Onondaga cave ever since then. It's never split into multiple personality disorder. So, would you guys like to see what it's like in here with absolutely no light? All right. A nice old sequencer. Gonna let the suspense grow a little bit.